Welcome to this special edition of the New Stack Makers on the road for KubeCon EU 2022 in Valencia, Spain. Discussions from the show floor with technologists giving you the expertise and insights that will help you in your everyday work.
KubeCon and CloudNativeCon conferences gather adopters and technologists to further the education and advancement of cloud-native computing. The vendor-neutral events feature domain experts and key maintainers behind popular projects like Kubernetes, Prometheus, Envoy, Core DNS, Containered, and more.
Hi, it's B. Cameron Gain, correspondent with the New Stack. I'm here today in Valencia, Spain for speaking French, for KubeCon 2022. And I'm welcoming for a discussion on OpenTelemetry. I'm welcoming or speaking with Morgan McLean from Splunk. Hi, Morgan.
Hi. Hi, my name is Morgan McLean. I'm a director of product management at Splunk. I'm also on the OTel governance committee, and I'm very involved in the project as are my peers here. And I've been involved since the very beginning. And
I'm with Ted Young from LightStep, which I know fairly well.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Ted Young. Go by Ted Suo on the internet. I work at LightStep, but spend all of my time working on the OpenTelemetry project, one of the co-founders here with Morgan, and on the governance committee with these two fine gents.
And I'm moving more towards the networking side of things. I'm here with Daniel Dyla from Dynatrace. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me here. I'm from Dynatrace. I'm a senior open source architect there, and I work on open source work full-time. I'm the maintainer of the OpenTelemetry JavaScript client, and I am on the governance committee with these two.
So OpenTelemetry, what is the status now? And maybe you could give some context of, or for anybody, regardless of their observability journey, what should they know?
Yeah, so the quick version is OpenTelemetry is a standard and an implementation for the artifacts and things that you need to extract critical telemetry, critical machine data, really, from your infrastructure and from your applications. It's generally been focused on back-end services, back-end infrastructure, though that will change in the future. And the status is that distributed tracing has been mature and generally available for, I think, over a year now. And metrics, the general availability, we just announced our release candidates being available for that today. Right. So this is the first really usable in production version of OpenTelemetry's metrics support. And the logging support's coming later this year.
You mentioned there are some changes coming about. What is that?
Yeah. So Ted, do you want to take it?
Yeah, I mean, by changes, I think the biggest thing is just stability, right? Yeah. So the long-term goal of the project has been to supply tracing metrics and logs as a single correlated braid of data. So rather than having these three siloed separate streams of data, all of that data is integrated into a single graph, which is really helpful for modern analysis tools that want to find correlations and do more kind of advanced kind of machine learning approaches to statistical analysis. So OpenTelemetry stabilizing its metrics and logging signals is a big part of the core value the project intends to provide.
Well, you mentioned ML or machine learning. What? Yeah. And what else? I mean, why is that so conducive for machine learning?
Well, what
else as well?
Well, it's the volume of sort of well-structured and correlatable data, right? ML is one technique that you might use to analyze it. To be clear, there's a lot of very powerful traditional techniques that this unlocks as well. But the critical thing that OpenTelemetry gives developers and operators is it makes it very easy for them to extract this information from their applications. Historically, that's been very difficult. And secondly, it allows you to correlate, say, traces and logs together really easy, traces and metrics together really easily, services and the infrastructure they run on very easily. Again, that's been very difficult. OpenTelemetry gives you the agents you need, the SDKs you need, and even the protocol that you need to transmit this data to a backend like Splunk or Dynatrace or LightStep or various others to analyze that data.
LightStep has been very active in OpenTelemetry. Could you kind of give that story there, the background?
Yeah, sure. So LightStep was founded, one of the co-founders, this guy named Ben Siegelman, who wrote the distributed tracing system at Google. So he used to work at Google, and he wrote a white paper on it called the Dapper system. And basically most of the tracing systems that have been built since then have been built off of the Dapper paper. And so when Ben left Google and founded LightStep to build his own observability company focused on distributed tracing, he also helped co-found the Open Tracing project, which, along with OpenCensus, which also came from Google, which Morgan was
I used
one
to
of
be
the
at Google, and I was working on that. Yeah.
Okay.
Those two projects then combined to form the OpenTelemetry project. So a lot of the architecture and DNA in OpenTelemetry comes out of Google, and LightStep also kind of has a similar origin story.
Yeah.
And then on the networking end, though, which is needless to say, critical. What can we say about the networking component? And this is Dynatrace's area, obviously.
I mean, it may be Dynatrace's area, but it's not my personal area of expertise. But I don't think there's really a lot of focus on networking in OpenTelemetry so far.
I didn't think
we
so.
really focus a lot more on like the application side of things and on like making your application stack observable. So the idea is that like if you have monitoring tools, like they're great, but it needs to OpenTelemetry makes it easier to expose your application so that monitoring tools can see it more easily.
I mean, I've heard of it referenced as a plugin, for example. Maybe you could dig in a little deeper about how you implement OpenTelemetry with these different observability tools. How does that go about?
Yeah, so I mean, we try to be very observability tool agnostic. That was right from day one. A big focus for us is to not try to like choose winners or anything like that. So by defining like the OTLP format and protocol, any vendor that wants to or any open source tool can implement like a receiver for that, or can implement a plugin in the OpenTelemetry collector and begin working with the data.
So it's definitely facilitating that process, that adoption process. To say.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think you would agree that observability is enormously complex, but at the same time, it's something you can see, from my understanding, results immediately.
Yes.
You know whether or not it's working and bringing you any kind of benefit, even I hate to say business benefit, because I love
absolutely
technology,
critical.
but
Yeah.
it's something you can. You either works and you're getting results you need or not.
Yeah.
Do you agree? And if so, why?
Observability, like when we talk about it, obviously if you're not familiar, it might come across as a vague term, but really it means like giving you deep insight into the status and states and ways to fix your applications and your infrastructure, right? And so when I think of observability, like historically people think of monitoring tools, which I think Ted mentioned, and those are used to detect a few infrastructure problems historically. But when I think of observability, the reason why it's so much more critical than everything we've talked about in the past is it reduces your development iteration cycles. Like we're going beyond just talking about like, hey, my service is down, I need to fix it, my customers are mad at me. That's monitoring, right? But with observability, it's also like we pushed a new update to our code. Has that changed our business metrics? Has that changed our application metrics or infrastructure metrics? To me, in a few years, a business not using first-class observability tools and using probably OpenTelemetry to send that data into them would be like a business today not using source control, right? Or not using any of the sort of, or not using monitoring, or not using any of the sort of standard development practices that if you don't have like even people just out of university, if they come and work for you, you're going to walk out the door on the first day if you don't have those. And in a few years, that's going to be observability as well. Because if your competitors, if you're a sort of consumer of this stuff, if your competition, their iteration cycles are incredibly short where they can push out changes, see the impact of those. If their developers, when they're extending a service or infrastructure, can just look at an observability tool and see how that service or infrastructure interacts with the rest of their stack. If your competition has that and you don't, you're going to be so much slower at shipping software. You're going to be so much slower at responding to changes. Your developers are going to have so much of a worse experience working for you that you're going to have some real challenges.
I mean, you mentioned developers, which is obviously it's crucial for them or critical for them. But what about the operations people?
Them too.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think one thing that OpenTelemetry provides for operators is the collector component is a place where you can do an incredible amount of observability processing. For example, you can generate new metrics on the fly based off of tracing data. You can append additional resources and enrich the data. There's a lot of stuff that in maybe more traditional systems, if you wanted to generate a new metric or change the data flow in some way, you would have to go to a developer, ask them to write some code, and then redeploy the application in order to make that change.
And it's non-trivial, right? Like
It's
if
not
you wanted
trivial.
to correlate your logs with a request, that would historically be very, very challenging.
Yeah.
But even if, like, by adding tracing with OpenTelemetry, even if you're not as interested in tracing, you should be, but if you're not, you can still get those logs at least correlated for a given request.
And because the data is standardized that's coming out, it means you don't have to know too much about the source of data as an operator. You can have some strong expectations of basically how to understand a system just based on the standard observability data it's emitting.
I was going to say, actually, just to build on that, you were saying it's non-trivial, but it's a bad combination of both non-trivial and everybody needs it.
Yeah, that's a
so
good
you
point.
end up with everybody building their own system to do it.
And then you don't get that full stack visibility.
Yeah, exactly.
You get little silos.
And that's like the real value of the collector for me is like if there are like battle-tested implementations. I know this works because it's been deployed a bunch of times and I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. What is the status in the context of CNCF, the project of OpenTelemetry right now? It's right now there's OpenTelemetry 1.0, I believe, or what is the status of the project?
Yeah, so the project status, there are various like version numbers, but we tend to look at it as stability by signal. So right now today, tracing is stable, metrics has just become stable, logging is experimental but will become stable probably like end of Q3.
I mean, parts of it are already stable.
Parts of it are stable. It's just not totally
not across the whole stack.
Totally stable. And within the context of the CNCF, the project this past year moved from sandbox to incubation.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
What about in this? There's a new standard that came out, or it's called metrics. I think. Is that what it is? OpenTelemetry metrics? What is that? How's that helping? Why was it needed?
Yeah, so OpenTelemetry is divided into different signals. So, like I mentioned, we have tracing that's already been that was already very mature.
Yeah.
We have metrics, as Ted mentioned. We have logging on the way.
Yeah.
In the future, we may have more types of signals. We were talking in our community meeting yesterday. A lot of people are interested in profiling.
Yeah.
And so, like today, if you use OpenTelemetry's tracing components, that's within the SDKs, that's within the collector agent. Those are very robust. They're generally available. They're supported. Metrics, the big announcement is that we've had our first set of metrics releases where that is effectively the case. They're release candidates, like if there's some horrific, like game-breaking bug or something in them, it will be updated. But like this is the first, effectively, attempt at a GA release. What will most likely happen is in a few weeks, everyone says, yeah, this is great, and we slap a GA label on it and it's good. And we finished the documentation and everything. Daniel's wincing when I say this.
I always hesitate to make hard promises like that until it's done.
As most likely, but like that's the path that's on, right? And so you will see over time more signals added to OpenTelemetry, and then they'll go through this same progression of alpha, beta, release candidate, GA.
Yeah.
Yep. And now that with metrics done and logging done soon, those are like the three that were the big ones we really wanted to get done.
Yeah.
I think it'll give us more time to focus on things like documentation and
more integrations,
experience and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I should mention the thing about OpenTelemetry having all of these signals together is we do a lot of work under the hood to actually allow people to correlate across these signals in a way that matches how operators actually look at this data and move through it. You don't just look at metrics and then just look at logs and just look at traces. You're often pivoting back and forth. You see some metrics go critical. You then want to look at the transaction logs for traces that were generating those metrics.
Right, okay.
And by having that data actually connected together as part of the same data stream, it becomes much easier to build UIs and tools that allow you to quickly move through that data.
Because otherwise you're stuck with tools that are themselves siloed because the data is siloed.
Yeah.
Right. And that's another big benefit of the collector is that it's like a unified processing of all three of
Exactly.
the.
Yes.
So instead of having to use a separate tool for each of those signals and then somehow reconnecting them later, it's like a unified processing pipeline.
That's cool. And what, for example, you have your favorite observability tools, and now you're going to be able to put that together in a way that where you're not flipping back and forth with screens, et cetera.
So like historically, people would use like a tracing tool, maybe.
Yeah.
A monitoring
Maybe.
tool, probably, and a logging tool, definitely. And with OpenTelemetry, those tools can now better converge, right? And you look at firms like Dynatrace that was historically like APM focused, like Splunk that was historically very logging focused. The reason these firms and LightStep and New Relic and so many others are investing in OpenTelemetry is that once the project is successful and heavily adopted, which is happening right now, that their own tools produced by these firms can become so much more powerful because they can absorb all of this data in a unified way. They can say, oh, this span from this trace was from this service that was running on this machine. Here are the host metrics from the same machine. These are things that were very, very challenging before.
Yeah.
And this makes it very easy, and it's going to allow these tools to become very popular. And I talked about the commercial ones. I mean, it's the same is true for open source tools like Prometheus and Jaeger and others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you'll hear a lot of talk around, like I mentioned, machine learning earlier, and people building like really fancy statistical analysis tools to find correlations and things like that. But I think a lot of the benefit is actually just time saving. A lot of these workflows that developers have to do today are operators when they're fighting fires.
Painful.
They're very painful because the human operators having to just do a lot of this work in their brain. They're having to be the glue between these separate tools.
They have to do the context switching themselves.
Which is just slow and cumbersome. You know, humans weren't really like optimized to play that role, and so by offloading a lot of that work to machines frees up the operator to focus more on like figuring out what their hypothesis is and then validating it.
Right. And these techniques are great, but good, robust, accurate data is a prerequisite for all of them.
Yeah.
You can't do any of it until the data's there.
You can't do any kind of deep analysis with bad data, right? Like apply all the ML and buzzwords you want on it.
It just doesn't work.
It's not going to work, right?
Yeah.
And even if it does work, it'll be 10 times easier to have better data coming in the first place.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You touched upon Prometheus, and that's the essential open source
Sort of monitoring
component.
metrics processing system. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
We worked with them actually fairly extensively in the design of our metrics system.
Yeah.
One of our goals was we want to work with all of the existing metrics tools, including like old things like StatsD, but Prometheus was at the top of our list of
Yes.
basically, we wouldn't consider our metrics tool a success if it didn't play well with Prometheus. So that was
because
a big
we're
goal.
not
We
going to
actually
get
took a
people
big-
to drop their Prometheus deployments.
Prometheus is great.
No.
And we don't want them to.
Yeah.
We took a pretty big reset actually to
Yeah.
achieve that, from what I remember.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
it's critical to our success.
why is that?
Because Prometheus is just a very popular backend for metrics right now, and we want to support them. And there's also, again, there's a lot of like Prometheus plumbing that you have to install along the way. There's the Prometheus backend and the Prometheus UI, and we want to make it possible for people to replace that Prometheus plumbing with OpenTelemetry plumbing.
For the data collection part.
For the kind of instrumentation and pipeline, just so they don't end up having to run like 3 different agents, you know.
Because then they'll lose all those correlations we talked about, right?
Exactly.
Like, so like even if you want to use Prometheus, which probably most of the people here do,
You
because it's
should,
pretty
yeah.
darn good.
Yeah.
Right.
But even if you want to do that, if you're using the Prometheus instrumentation, which is good on its own, you won't get those correlations of your traces, those correlations with your logs, everything else that we just talked about.
Okay.
Right? There's power in having them come from the same source that's working on all these different signal types.
And as much as we don't want to eat their lunch, they don't want to eat ours too.
No.
Like they have no interest in building tracing
they're all
and all that
CNCF
stuff.
projects, right? We
Right.
meet with them very regularly. But there's a lot of goodness coming out there.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's you have your favorite observability tools. One of the beautiful things of observability for me is that you're able to pick and choose the ones you want. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and you can rapidly change. It's very interchangeable. And I think that is the main takeaway, and OpenTelemetry project is conducive to that goal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal.
Yeah, we're really proud of the progress that we've achieved as a project. Like this is a huge announcement for us. It's the fulfillment of the project's original promise of tracing and metrics, and then we're going to add on with that log. So it's a very exciting time.
And metrics is only a year late.
Yeah.
Only once the microphones are off.
Well, on that note, thank you very much for joining us. It's B. Cameron Gain here in Valencia, Spain. It's a beautiful place. I can't recommend coming here more. For KubeCon next year, it'll be in Amsterdam. And thank you for joining us so much.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope to see you soon.